So the Florida Gators secondary has their question marks, but I'm not worried about their ability to thrive in 2023. We're going to talk about that here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy Friday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33. Join the Locked On Gators Discord. Links in the description below. If you haven't yet signed up for Florida Victorious, you should, and you can get 20% off by using promo code LOCKED when you sign up. So there you go, save 20% off your first month with that. But today we are focusing on the Florida Gators secondary because I feel like we talk about this defense a lot, and a lot of the conversation revolves around the aggressiveness, the pass rush, the defensive line, all that stuff. And the kind of area of concern right now is the secondary. Because at corner, you've got Jason Marshall. And Jason Marshall has the potential to be truly great. He's very good in man coverage. We know that last year he struggled in cover 3. I don't think he was bad. It was just not as good as his man coverage, which played a lot of last year with quarters. That tends to work out that way. But we'll have to see if he can put it all together this year on a more consistent basis. That's what we're looking for. Consistency here as far as, can you dominate? Good. Can you dominate consistently? That's really what we need to look for from Jason Marshall. I do think that a big area for him specifically that's going to help him a lot is how aggressive this defense is going to be up front. Whether you're talking about blitzes or just creepers or just being straight up creative with the pass rush, which we know Austin Armstrong is going to be, which, by the way, happy 30th birthday, Austin Armstrong. Yesterday, he turned 30, which is insane to me that the Florida Gators have a 30-year-old defensive coordinator right now. It's awesome. I love it, but it's also just insane to me. But with this defense being so aggressive, these corners on the back end are not going to have the issue that they had last year of basically being stuck in coverage for 6 seconds, which is incredibly difficult to do. The average time to throw for a lot of quarterbacks is in that 2.5, 3 second range. But if their receivers are covered, then you gotta obviously wait to throw the ball, and pass rush not getting home consistently enough last year will not be an issue this year. So less instances of Jason Marshall being in coverage for 6 seconds. And I think that he's the one that benefits from that mostly because he would often have very strong reps, but be in coverage for so long that eventually he would break down. Because if you've never played DB, it is incredibly hard to spend 6 seconds trying to react and predict what a receiver is going to do while they run a route. So very difficult there, where that's not going to be an issue. So I think Jason Marshall thrives most from that, or will benefit most from that for this year compared to last year, just because he's not going to be stuck in coverage so long. And that was often what got him specifically, because usually other corners were not able to cover for 6 seconds regardless, or 4 seconds or 5 seconds. So Jason Marshall not going to be exploited by that this year. As for the other options, there's 3 other main corners I think we're going to see a lot of this year: Jalen Kimber, Devin Moore, and Jakeem Jackson. I'm expecting all of them to take the next steps in developing. Like Devin Moore last year played 5 games. He had some great flashes as a true freshman. He had some moments where it was like, oof, we're not really sure what you were doing out there. But he had some great flashes as a freshman before getting hurt. Fully expecting him to be ready to take those next steps in coverage. I think my favorite thing about Devin Moore is just his aggressiveness. Like he is just so in your face as a cover man. I think that's going to mesh really well with what Austin Armstrong wants to do. And I think that Devin Moore's going to thrive there. Jalen Kimber is someone who last year, there were times where I was critical of him. There were times where I was like, I'm not really sure. But I feel like as the year got on, he got better. And I will say also that I feel like one of the areas that he played really well in was in cover three. I feel like that's where he was at his best. Not that he was elite there, but I think that's where he was at his best. And I think that that's a big benefit for him because this year, Florida is probably going to play more cover three than any other coverage. That's what Austin Armstrong has typically done. So I think that Jalen Kimber is going to be, thrown into the defensive system or the coverage scheme that he excels in. So I think Jalen Kimber is going to take that next step. And I think he's going to get a lot of playing time in 2023. He's experienced. He's got the defensive system that works for him. And he's got just the skill set that should excel with this defense. I think he's also more aggressive than people give him credit for. Just in coverage. I mean, we know the pick six he had last year with the cast on his hand. But I think that Jalen Kimber is more aggressive than people give him credit for. And I think with this year, he's going to be kind of given the green light to be like, all right, well, if you think you can ball hawk, go get it then. Go get it. And I think that Jalen Kimber is going to thrive with that kind of mentality around him. And then, of course, Jakeem Jackson is someone who, long, great athlete who, we talked about him a little bit the other day with Brian Smith. Jakeem Jackson is someone who, great athlete, played receiver, moved to corner, so he's still learning the position. But his potential is just sky high. And I think that with this defense, he's going to get reps to play early and kind of, we'll say, fast forward his development as a cornerback, where, again, he's still relatively new to the position. He's still learning how to do it. But I think that he's going to be given those steps to take, or given the opportunity to take steps forward. And also, it's going to be a defense that's going to allow him to work vertically a lot. So I think, and by that, I mean playing cover three, oftentimes you're going to be working vertically. You're going to be going down the sideline frequently. I think that's going to give him a little bit of an advantage because, again, like I spoke about with Teddy Foster when Teddy Foster committed last week, with Jakeem Jackson, it's kind of the same thing where you're long, you're an athlete, and you're going to be in a defense that allows you to work vertically often. If you can keep yourself between the receiver and the ball and keep basically the receiver between you and the sideline, then you can wall them off there. And if you can do that, you're going to be great. Like, that's what Richard Sherman did very well. That's what Jakeem Jackson needs to do. That's what Teddy Foster needs to do. And this defense is going to allow them that freedom to work in that same way. So that's my expectation for Jakeem Jackson. And also, him being a rotational piece means, hey, you're going to get some game time experience, but you're not going to be thrown into the fire completely. Like, we just need you to do your job there. I think Jakeem's going to really thrive there in 2023 almost immediately. I think by mid-season, people are going to be like, all right, maybe Jakeem can be corner 3 or even corner 2 for the Florida Gators once we hit that mid-season point and he's really just got a little bit of polish thrown onto him. However, that's not the biggest area of concern for the Florida Gators. It's the safeties, which we do have to talk about, and we are going to talk about in just a second. I do want to tell you guys first, though, about eBay Motors, because for a championship team like the Florida Gators want to be, it's about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time that you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time. Just add your ride to My Garage, look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the parts are fitting right, guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right price on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Motors, Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions do apply. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. And looking at this safety room, for those who don't know, safety is my favorite position on defense. It's what I played before I played corner, and I love safety. Okay, just saying that. I am also a massive fan of RJ Melton. RJ Melton, of course, the transfer portal safety that came from Michigan to the Florida Gators, and I cannot wait to see him thrive in this secondary. Like, I know safety is a big question mark for a lot of Florida Gators fans, big concern for a lot of Florida Gators fans. This spot specifically with RJ Melton, nope, not for me. Not for me. With RJ Melton, he's got experience in 2 Michigan defensive systems because they've had 2 defensive coordinators during his time there. Both of them ran similar defenses on the back end to what Austin Armstrong runs. Okay, the front, Austin Armstrong's way more aggressive than either of them. But on the back end, very similar coverage schemes. Okay? That's one thing where it's like, okay, RJ Melton is going to step in and just be able to know how to play this defense immediately. That's automatically a big step up. So that's one. 2, RJ Melton has played in big time games with Michigan. And I mean, if you're going to come from the Big Ten to the SEC, I think there's 2 great schools that you can come from to do that. And it's Ohio State and Michigan, which I know they hate each other. But big time games, RJ Melton's played in them. Okay? He also did something that I feel like that often gets overlooked where, yeah, we talk about the defensive system being similar from Michigan to Florida. We talk about playing in big time games like he did with Michigan. This is not going from the group of 5 to the power 5, which not a knock, but that is an additional question mark. But I think for RJ Melton, he knows what strong secondary play looks like. Like, he knows how a strong secondary performs. He knows how a strong secondary communicates. That's one of the things that makes me happiest to have him on this roster. Because when you look at what happened last year in the secondary, so often it was these guys are not communicating properly. You can communicate and communicate poorly. Okay. That was a big issue last year. This year, they are communicating, or they're going to communicate well. And I think RJ Melton's going to be a big part of that. Whether or not he's the primary communicator for the secondary, up to be determined. But I do think that just his presence and experience knowing what a strong secondary operates like is going to be a huge part of his Florida Gators safety room specifically to take that next step and to answer the questions of, safety is going to be a liability here. Miguel Mitchell is who I think is going to be the other starting safety opposite RJ Melton. And Miguel Mitchell is someone that this coaching staff is very high on. The last coach, like Patrick Toney, was very high on Miguel Mitchell. I've said this before. I don't know if I've ever put the name to it, but I've said this before where I spoke to Patrick Toney one time and I was like, hey, who do you think, like it's going to be Kamari Wilson starting the secondary, but who do you think the other one is? And he was just like, Miguel Mitchell's the best safety on this team right now. So the last coaching staff, or Patrick Toney, last defensive coordinator, safeties coach, very high on Miguel Mitchell. And while Miguel Mitchell worked primarily as a star last season, him playing more of a box safety role is going to be a relatively seamless transition there. Probably going to start a little further back in the secondary, obviously, but working those flats is going to be a big part for that box safety spot that Miguel Mitchell will likely be playing. And I do think that he's got a better chance of succeeding as a deep safety than Kamari Wilson had. Because you'll see 2 safety shells very often with this Florida Gators secondary. But again, cover 3 is going to be the most played coverage. And you can't just always have the same safety rotate down, because then opposing offenses can know which, okay, once you see that safety come down, it's cover 3, you know who's rotating down, you know where the weaknesses are going to be. Miguel Mitchell, RJ Melton, I think they're going to be the 2 starting safeties. I think that they can both play the box and deep safety, at least passably, not be complete liabilities. So I'm looking forward to them as a starting duo. Kamari Wilson is going to play a lot. I do think he's going to be the 3rd safety in the bunch, but he's going to play a lot still. I think that he's not overlooked, but I think that people think of him as a box safety, and there's people that are like, oh, maybe he could play linebacker, and then that's going to be a solid spot for him. Sure. But I will say, I don't think he's as bad as a deep safety spot as people give him credit for. I think that he wasn't given many opportunities last year, and that you are totally fair to question his ability to do it consistently. But I feel like people place him in the box of he can't do it, and I don't think that's true. I think Kamari can play as a deep safety occasionally. I think he's capable of playing that box safety role that does have to play deep safety sometimes. So I'm not as concerned with that. Granted, it's definitely a question mark. I feel like a lot of people are like, "Oh, we know he's bad at that." And here's the thing. No, we don't. The only thing we know is that he's still unproven. That's it. So I'm not as concerned with that. Jordan Castell and Bryce Thornton, two true freshmen that both have the IQs, skill sets, and experience in a similar defense. That, in my opinion, they'll both be able to work both safety spots eventually. Although ideally, we don't see too much of them this year. Not a knock on them. It's just so difficult to play safety or linebacker or anything really where you have to be working above the shoulders in the SEC. So ideally, they don't play too much this year. Although it wouldn't shock me if we saw them rotating in a bit as 8 to 12 steps a game. Wouldn't shock me, and I wouldn't be mad about that. I am excited to see what Dijon Johnson can become. Because I know he was like corner, safety. What's he going to be? Right now, I think he's a better fit at safety as a deep safety specifically. I feel like he can really thrive there. But he was a mid-year enrollee. So I'm not too sure what he can bring to the table early on. Because while he's been a signee, yeah, and he's been a Gator here, he just got on campus recently. I'm not sure how he's going to really step in and be able to know how to read and react to things immediately, like this defense is going to need him to do. So I'm not sure what we'll see from him early on, but long term, I'm excited to see what he can become. I think that when you look at the rest of this secondary, the star position is obviously the final spot. It's a key spot. I've told this story before. I used to play in a defense where obviously we didn't call it star because we just didn't do that. But I played in a defense where they wanted me to rotate down because I went from safety to corner, and then they wanted me to come down to the slot, and I could not do it. Okay. I will tell you straight up. I could play corner. I could play safety. I cannot play in the slot. The slot is the most difficult position to play on a defense. Easily the most difficult position to play in a secondary. The most difficult position to play on a defense. I think it's maybe the second hardest position in football behind quarterback. I think star is just so difficult because you have to be able to go inside out in a moment. And if you screw up, it's probably a first down in a solid game. So you have to be able to go inside out in a moment. You have to be able to be versatile against both the pass and the run. The thing that really screwed me up was I did not have the change of direction to play that slot spot. Like reading an offense is the easy part. Reacting when you get it wrong is the hard part. Or just not even trying to predict it and just trying to react is the hard part. So star is the hardest position on defense. For me, it's also the biggest area of concern in this Gator secondary. Like there are question marks throughout the secondary, yes. But most of those are guys where it's like, okay, well, we haven't seen you a ton. So we're projecting like, can you really start right away? Can you be starter quality right away? Those are the question marks at the other spots in the secondary. For me, and I think I've been very open about this, I'm just not very high on the players that are at the star spot right now. So for me, it's not even, we don't know what we're getting here. For me, it's, I think we know what we're getting, or I think I know what we're getting, and I'm not super stoked about it. Like Jadarius Perkins last year struggled a lot. He made some flash plays, like the pick against Georgia. He made some splash plays. He made some great plays, but he did nothing to show me that he can be a reliable, consistent starting nickel. I said this since last year. I think Jadarius Perkins is better suited to play safety, straight up safety. Whether you put him in the box, the deep, I think he's better at safety. I don't think he is an SEC starter quality nickel. I just don't. And I could be wrong. Like, he could prove me wrong easily, especially after another year with Corey Raymond. And in a defense where it's going to be similar, but not the same to what we saw with Patrick Toney. Like, so I'm not saying that, I'm unequivocally, undeniably right here. But this is my opinion. Like, I know I had a YouTube comment the other day. I was just like, how are you going to say, it was about Kendall Jackson. Because I was like, oh, like, I don't think Kendall Jackson is going to be Zachary Carter or Javon Dexter. And they're like, how can you say that? He could be the best. He could be the best defensive player we've had in 15 years. He can be. In my opinion, he won't be. And that's what I get paid to do is to watch the guys and give my opinion. So Jadarius Perkins could work out wonderfully. I don't think he's a great nickel player. I don't think he's great in the slot. I think he'd be better back or deeper in the secondary. Jaden Hill is someone that I've been openly very skeptical of. It's not that I don't like him. I don't know Jaden, so I can't pretend that I like him or dislike him. I think he's fantastic in zone coverage. Honestly, he's probably the best zone player on the entire defense. And probably going to see more, or we know we're going to see more zone coverage this year than we got last year. So maybe Jaden Hill is going to thrive there. Okay? Like, playing more zone this year could help him a lot. Especially because when you think about it, when you're playing quarters at corner, and you play quarters, and you're cover 4 or whatever, and you have to kind of work with some man principles. When you're playing in the slot, there's less of that, because even when you're playing quarters, you have the flat and you have that curl zone, like you have those. So you're playing zone more than man principles there. So yeah, ideally or idealistically, maybe he would thrive there. Less man responsibilities. For me, my bigger question with Jaden Hill this year is he had that setback last year that still slowed his knee down. And I think that it showed in his change of direction. I don't think it was as good as it could have been. And that's not stopping and starting. Like, obviously, yeah, you can stop and then accelerate forward. I mean, changing direction, going left, right, working laterally. I don't think it was there last year from what we saw from him before that. So working from the slot, you have to be able to do that. And if his change of direction isn't better than it was last year, this year could get rough for him. That's my concern with him. I think in zone, he's got the best eyes on this entire defense. But you still have to be able to work inside out here, and that's my concern for Jaden Hill. Because if he can't do it, it's going to be rough. Especially because if he can't do it, Jadarius Perkins hasn't shown he can operate successfully, consistently, reliably at star. Behind them, you have Aaron Gates and Sharif Denson. I am very excited for what both of those guys can become. I think Sharif Denson is more ready to play right now than Aaron Gates is. But I would hope that we don't have to look at this secondary and go, thank goodness we have 2 freshmen that are playing a lot of time, or any freshmen that are playing a ton of time at the star spot. Maybe by mid-season, take some snaps away. But going into the year, that star is the spot that scares me the most. And that's why I'm like, corner, I'm pretty comfortable with. Safety, safety I know is a lot of question marks. I'm comfortable with projecting those guys to work out. Star, not super stoked about it. I'm just going to be honest about that one. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day, every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow, maybe with Brandon Carroll, if we can make our schedules line up. If not, we will be back Monday with more Locked On Gators. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work at the Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, NFL 33, and I will see you all tomorrow.